Good morning, Ms. Gonsher. Nice to meeting you. This is our honor to speak with you and to get to know more about yourself, about how uh, you go through many things in the past. In the last 40 years, you work as a speechwriter and policy advisor and public administration for many executive agencies. So could you please let us know about yourself a little bit and how you transition from one job to another?
Thank you for inviting me to be interviewed this morning. I've had an extensive career in public policy that started in the 1970s. I was one of the fortunate ones in that I had a terrific mentor here at ASU who opened up some initial doors to the profession, and those doors opened up other doors. In fact, it was rare when I ever applied for a position, and I've held several positions at both state and local level. Um, Most of the time, I would be asked if I wanted to take on a new responsibility by a mayor or a governor. Um, and I think between 1970 and when I formally retired, I probably applied for maybe two jobs during that time where I actually went through a fill out an application recruitment evaluation process. But I was one of the lucky ones.
That's really impressive. Uh, so, could you please let us know what's your first job in politics?
My first job was when I was in graduate school, and Dr. Bruce Merrill, within the former political science department here at ASU, asked me if I wanted to work for a candidate that he was working for. And I did everything in the office that was required of me. I emptied garbage cans, I got people coffee, I got to know people, I observed a lot, and I learned a lot. And from there, I worked in a few more political campaigns. And then in the mid 70s or so, I started at the city of Phoenix as one of the very first staff assistants to the mayor and city council.
So, what motivated you to join politics in the first place? There must be something that you want to do or want to change in American politics as a young man.
When I was a young man, even before college, I read the book Advice and Consent by Alan Drury, a Pulitzer Prize winning novel. And that book, that story, what I learned from that book, got me excited and interested in government and politics.
Back in 1970, I think Arizona maybe is and still is one of the most conservative states in the United States because we have Barry Goldwater as our presidential candidate in 1964. So I think in 1970s we're still very conservative. So I just wonder what's the political environment 40 years ago in Arizona.
The term conservative 40 years ago was defined differently than it is today. In fact, most people with whom I worked on both sides of the aisle, notwithstanding they were Republicans or Democrats, were moderates. And they worked together, they collaborated for the good of the state of Arizona. The extremism that we see today did not exist to the same degree when I started my career. Consequently, I have worked for 15 Republicans and 15 Democrats in my career. And I would view virtually all of them as middle of the roaders, not extremists on either side of the spectrum.
That's very interesting that you work for candidates from both parties. So how to win their trust at that moment when you work for them, since you are really good at working with either side of the aisle.
There's a major difference between working in politics and working in government. And though early on I worked in politics, I worked in campaigns, at some point in my career I made the decision that working in government for political individuals was a preference. I was much more comfortable doing that kind of work. I seemed to be more adept at doing that kind of work. I understood that the work I was doing was certainly political in nature in favor of whomever I was working for at the time. Um, but I chose to work on the management side of the business and not the campaign side of the business early on in my career.
So can we first talk about what you did for the campaign? I noticed that you once worked as a speech writer, and do you mind talking a little bit about this job? And because this is a very interesting job, how did you get a start and get ready for this job in the first place?
I didn't get ready to be a speechwriter. I just became a speechwriter as time evolved. Um, there were opportunities to write speeches for both candidates and for public officials. Not everybody on a staff likes or wants to do that kind of work. I raised my hand and said, I will do it. And if you do that often enough, people start turning to you to say, I have a speech I have to give next Saturday night. Would you mind writing it for me? And so I sort of fell into the role of being a speechwriter at various times during my career.
So you get really short notice to write a speech. You just now mentioned someone told you just get them a speech by Saturday night. So with such short notice, how did you write a speech, and what kind of thing you should do to prepare for a speech? Such like how do you communicate with the people who ask you to write a speech, and how do you communicate with other staff members or other speech writers? How to make a speech really convincing and powerful?
Well, even though I may have been the one to put the ultimate words down on paper, it is a collaborative process. There is a need to call upon others to provide research material, information, up-to-date information that can be incorporated into the speech. You need to contact others who work with the public official to ensure that what you are saying reflects the public official's views. There's also something that one learns as a speechwriter that cannot be taught, and that is that at some point you learn the tone and cadence of the person who's giving the speech. So as I'm writing speeches for former Governor Rose Mofford, in my mind, I'm a 70-year-old woman who is governor of the state of Arizona who is expressing these thoughts. And that's just something that evolves in one's ability to perform, but difficult to learn, if not impossible to learn through textbooks and academic training.
That's really interesting experience to imitate someone that you are not really are. And so could you please give us some examples and how to make your speech more acceptable to the audience, and how to make your case?
Let's use former Governor Rose Mofford
Okay.
as an example. She was the first governor I worked for, and Governor Mofford has a fantastic personality, and part of that personality is humor. And she enjoyed making humorous comments in her speeches, not jokes. She didn't tell jokes in the traditional form of a joke. A man walks into a bar with a hippopotamus on his shoulder. Not that kind of joke at all. But she would make fun of situations in order to have the audience feel more comfortable with what she wants to say. And I brought an example with me if you'd like to hear.
Sure.
Okay. I wrote for Governor Mofford for 20 years after she left office. I
Wow.
continued writing speeches
Okay.
for her. Governor Mofford was the person who saved spring training Cactus League baseball here in Phoenix. She was and still is. She's with us, fortunately. A tremendous sports fan. And so she would be called upon to give talks about baseball and other sporting events from time to time. In 2010, I remember she left office in 1991 or so, but in 2010, she was asked to testify